Hi folks, it's Rob Flux here from Property Developer Network coming to you for yet another Sunday session. And today, whoops, I think I've left my camera off. 2 seconds. How dare I do that? There we go, there I am. Always the faux pas of modern technology, right? So this particular session, you may recall some time ago, I came and spoke to you about the upcoming New South Wales land tax reforms that are in train. Well, today, we've got a very special guest, John Gilmovich from the Property Owners Association of New South Wales, who's going to give us a little bit of an update as to what's actually happening in and around that land tax space, and the fact that now is the time for any New South Wales property owners to actually have their say, whilst there is an opportunity to actually influence the outcome of the tax reforms, because these are genuinely a once in a generation change that are going to happen. And if you don't have your say right now, you're not going to have much of an opportunity. So firstly, welcome, John.
Rob, thanks very much for having me. It's my pleasure to come on. It is a very, very important and crucial pinpoint in property buying in New South Wales. And I just want to assist your audience with, probably some of the confusion that's out there and the conflicting information as much as I can.
Absolutely. So we're going to do a little bit of a presentation and a bit of back and forth on that in a sec. But firstly, why don't you tell us a little bit about who the Property Owners Association is, who you represent. I guess you've got members, and then you've also got, I guess, your wider impact and who you represent for all of New South Wales. So tell us about that.
Absolutely. So the POA, as we call it, was formed way back in 1951, believe it or not. So it's been around a long time. It was an association that was predominantly formed by private landlords to tackle, back in the day, what was the 1948 Residential Tenancy Act, and in particular at that point of time was at the centre was the Protected Tenants Act. So predominantly that was why they formed, to basically become a lobby group. And over the years, it's grown into basically what is now the premier stakeholder as a voice for the private property owners market in New South Wales. So we're representing the 1.2 million property investors and owners here. And it's done basically as a non-for-profit. So we're funded by the members. We don't get a cent out of the government whatsoever, as far as any grants. So we're self-funded and funded by our members, who are predominantly in the small to medium property ownership and property business space. And I guess, look, we've got a seat at the table. We've got a seat at the table with the New South Wales government as a go-to when it comes to reforms such as this. And over the years, we've handled the tenancies, we've handled building, we've handled strata, and commercial and industrial retail reforms. And here we are today at a point now where back on the table, because this has been going on for a while, and I mean, I've lost count, Rob. It's maybe 7 or 8 ministers in the last 4 or 5 years have changed, and this time round, I think they're taking it seriously. Put the white paper on the table with basically what is the property tax reform consultation.
Yeah, and I guess the impact of what is coming up, as I said, is a generational change. This is something that you're only going to get one crack at actually having a go at. From what I have seen of it, there are elements that have some merit, and there's elements that are a complete dog's breakfast. I think it's just going to create confusion and mayhem for any property owner ongoing if it gets up in its current guise. And so I'm really keen for, I guess, my network I guess, lean into organisations like yourself, where you've actually got the influence. Ourselves, you've said that you're looking after property investors. We are property developers, but we are just investors that are, I guess, manufacturing our profits rather than waiting for the market to do it. So there's, I think there's a lot of similarities between our two networks, and I'm sure some of your investors eventually develop, and plenty of our developers end up keeping as investments. So I think there's a lot of crossover.
Yeah, look, absolutely. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you call it. We try. I mean, I think many years ago it was called the Landlords Association. Landlords become a bit of a political dirty word. So we've evolved into the Property Owners Association. And by the way, we're not just a landlords group. We do represent the owner occupiers as well. And the first home buyers. So we represent quite a significant demographic, and that includes, of course, your developers, because some of our members are property, small to medium property developers. We don't represent the big end of town. That's another association that we occasionally meet with, but it's the small to medium enterprise, investor.
Yeah, and
that includes the developers.
To round out, I guess, who you are, the fact that we are talking about New South Wales today and you are the POA of NSW,
right.
There is equally similar POAs around the country. They are all
Yes.
local and I guess state-based, and looking after the interests of that particular state, and independent organisations, but loosely affiliated. Is that how I understand it?
Absolutely. Look, we're just, I guess we're running in our own paces and in our own, I guess, agendas, if you like. Occasionally we do cross over on a national level, but that hasn't happened for a while. But as I think mentioned before, Rob, it's all the state legislations are a bit different to each other. There's different rules for purchasing, the stock and station and the agents and the fair trading rules. Though there's a lot of similarity, there are some differences, and that's why we kind of pretty much run it as a state-based organisation without the crossovers, concentrating on our own affairs, and I guess each state has their own challenges.
Yeah.
And always pushed to the brink. Let me say, just I've been president of the organisation for about 5 years. I was formerly the vice president, the treasurer, and I came in as a pure member before joining the actual working committee. And the committee is made up of property professionals themselves. They're all volunteers, and they all do this, obviously not as a money spinner, but purely because they're in their industry. They are property owners and investors themselves, and they're passionate. They're passionate in building their wealth through property. And we don't always get it right, but we try to keep that balance. That balance up between the poor legislation and some legislation which is really going to improve things. So from my experience, Rob, we've made. By the way, I've been with the POA for about, I think I lost count, probably it's about 15 years now. Although I look like a young guy and I've got a bit more hair than you, Rob. That's because you're in property development.
Yeah, that takes it away.
That's it. I've been through about 3 decades of the marketplace here in Sydney, particularly, and I know from experience that the New South Wales government, especially the Liberals, have a way of just pushing through their agenda and pushing through legislation even after consultation. if you're not there at the table, if you're not voicing things to them, if you're not writing in, they won't stop. They'll just railroad it and push things through. And this is really important to know. It's not a matter of just sitting back and relaxing now. It's now time to move forward and have your say, like you said right at the start. And have your say means don't try and just email them or pick up the phone. You'll never get through to anyone these days. You need to make submissions.
Yeah, and we can talk about how people can do that
Yeah.
as we go. So now to the topic at hand, you've got a couple of slides that you put together to give us some context around the issue and what's actually happening. And I'll let you go into the detail of it, but it is I guess an opt-in type tax, which is kind of a little bit weird, but once you've opted in, you're stuck in, and
Can't opt out. Yeah,
you can't opt out.
Yeah.
Which means that over time it's going to get really, really confusing as to which property is in what state. What condition with regards to the tax that might apply. So
yeah.
I'll hand over to you, mate, to I guess bring your slides up and.
Okay.
Yep, all good. Go for it.
Okay, I'm actually not seeing the slides myself at the moment. Just one sec, as
I'm seeing you. I can assure you that they are going out live to everyone. So.
Okay, just bear a sec with me.
Well, while you're working out the tech side of things, I'll just reiterate to all of our New South Wales members in our Property Developer Network community. One of the things that John and the POA are going to be doing is on Wednesday this week coming up, they're going to be running a webinar that goes into a lot more detail. So we're going to touch on things today. They're going to go into a lot more detail on Wednesday with a few special guest speakers. I'm going to say very, very worthwhile coming to that event. I will stick the link into the page, I guess, a little later in the session so that everyone can actually go and register for that. But very worthwhile if you have any property or interest in property at all. So hopefully you got things working at your end now, John.
I don't seem to have control over the slide. Can you see that moving or not?
Yeah, I can't see it moving. What I can see is your title slide.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not quite there yet.
This is the wonderfuls of
Yeah.
going live. Yeah. All good, mate. If it doesn't come up, no, I'm sure you can just talk to what would have been on the slide. So,
okay. So by way of background, this all started in the 2020 budget, the New South Wales 2020 budget, and it was announced that for the first time in quite some time, we're going to be discussing. Not land tax reform, but taxational tax reform. And at the centre, the pitch was really about abolishing stamp duty. So we know stamp duty is a dirty two-letter word as well, and it has been a challenge, for especially the first home buyer sector. To scrape in their deposit or transact properties. And of course, the other big issue we're having here, the aging population with moving on from those large houses. One retired lady occupying a 6-bedroom house isn't its highest and best use. But
absolutely. And on the stamp duty side of things, that was going way back in time. That was meant to be abolished when GST came in, and
that's correct. Yeah, and
that never actually happened.
It never happened. So we've had a double whammy for a long time. We're getting double whacked, and my theory of it, I think we're getting triple whacked because we're paying council rates as well, and that's a form of land tax.
Yeah, and the reason why all of this is on the agenda is because stamp duty happens to be one of those things where If the property market slows down, then the government's revenue slows down. If the property market takes off, the government's revenue takes off. And so they aren't able to accurately predict that coming all the way through. So they're proposing to have this loose property tax to kind of merge those two together. So your slides are working now, mate. So
yeah, I've got it working. Touch wood. So you're absolutely right. There's a few things going on there in the current marketplace, and we know in New South Wales, even before COVID hit, that transaction volume generally of property started to slow down. Started to slow down really about 2 years ago, maybe 2.5. And so the government's, think tank said, well, okay, well, what are we going to do this? Because we need to fill the coffers, and if transactions are slowing down, and if our older demographic aren't moving, what is the incentive here? What can we create for more transactions to happen? And of course, the challenges around the first home buyers not entering the market as quick as they should. So stamp duty, I think you can see the slide there. It has been a generally despised political football, if you like, and I've been trying to get rid of it for years, just didn't know how and what strategy to play out. As you can see, New South Wales, it's practically the number one revenue as far as any duties are concerned. So residential property is the number one collection on duties, as opposed to you see there second last from the right there, the broad-based land tax, and we'll talk about that word broad-based in a second, exactly what it actually means. Because this time round, I think it is looking like it's going to be broadly applied. Now, just before I continue, I just want to say that this is only a proposal. Okay, you just have to understand that this is only a proposal at this stage. It's not in concrete, so it's up for discussion. But this is what we know so far. So here's the impediment of a first home purchaser trying to scrape in, what they need now is a 20% deposit to make a purchase. So you can see there over the years, the graph there with the number of years it actually takes, based on medium sales price of a New South Wales property. You can see it's sort of moving up and up and up. So it's just taking longer, to scrape in a deposit to purchase your first home. So we know, and everybody has known, it's been a challenge and an impediment to purchasing.
Yeah, and then stamp duty adds 2 or 3 years worth of more savings on top of that, and it's really hard for anyone to break into the market at all. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's almost impossible for the average salary earner, young couple, say, to go into home ownership in the capital city. It's just almost impossible unless they reach out to the bank of mum and dad, of course, or get an inheritance. So it's really hard. So the proposed new system is an opt-in system. So what's on the table is the government saying, okay, we're gonna get rid of stamp duty for you. The stamp duty goes, and then there's an opt-in new property tax, which is based on the land value of that property. So you can make a choice. What's here is you can make a choice to either pay the stamp duty and be done with it, or not pay the stamp duty and opt into this new property land tax. And once you opt in, as you said, that property, not the property owner, that property stays with that regime for the life of the property.
Yeah,
Or unless another government steps in and overturns the whole thing, which is not likely.
yeah, which means that firstly, if you have cash, is it more affordable to try and I guess pay the stamp duty up front? And a lot of people are going to try and do that, but 2 or 3 years worth of extra lag. So the temptation is that a lot of people will opt in, and then that property forever is stuck in that mode.
That's correct. So I'm going to show you an example of the figures on that front, what it looks like a real simple example of paying the stamp duty or not paying the stamp duty and opting into the land tax. But from what we can see is that second last point, which is it's going to create this kind of two-tier marketplace of a property that's actually got the opt-in and ones that haven't. Okay, now that could send a bit of a shockwave down property purchasing. We don't know what exactly that's going to look like, but let's say you're out in the marketplace and you're purchasing a property, then you need to deep dive and see, well, has it got the permanent property land tax, or it doesn't, and what does that look like for an investor or someone that's even buying a parcel of land, trying to do a subdivision?
Yeah, and I guess with that two-tier market, I guess there's, can I still pay stamp duty, or am I stuck in this forever? Which one of you, I guess, which one of those two do you think is going to be more attractive when that two-tier starts to split? So when you've got two identical properties sitting side by side and one's with and one's without, which one do you think ongoing is going to be more attractive and more saleable?
Yeah, so I think the key there, Rob, is going to be the duration you're going to be holding onto that property for. Because in an opt-in system, the longer you hold it, the more costly it's going to be for you. But if you're in a situation where you're either going to move or you're going to flip the property pretty quickly, and that's what you do as a business owner, that's your business, flipping properties, developing properties and moving on, then in the short term, paying the stamp duty, you'll be better off. So really, this is to do with the duration of your buy and hold, if you're doing a buy and hold strategy. Now, given the fact that they're trying to appease, because the media is only kind of pitching it one way, which is stamp duty is about to disappear out of New South Wales. That's how they're pitching this, without going into the detail. So for a first home buyer. Go on.
We all know that the media doesn't let the facts get in the way of a good story. So.
Absolutely. So this is purely pitched at with a political angle to appease first home buyers, so they can take a breath and go, you know what, I love this government. I'm going to be able to afford my very first home, and there's a kicker in all this, and we'll talk about that in a sec. They're throwing an extra $25,000 cash bonus to do it. And this has nothing to do with a first home buyer grant. They're actually throwing in $25K cash into the deal. You can go and buy white goods, or you can use that money to pay for the costs of lawyers, solicitors, and whatever you want to do.
Does that know long term that is then going to be an ongoing revenue stream forever? It's a subscription service. It's like a gym membership. You sign up and forget that you've got it, but you still keep paying it. So
you still keep paying it. That's correct. It's out of mind. It's out of sight. It's almost like a real smart tax,
So and I think where you said the duration of the ownership. So as property developers coming in and wanting to flip properties very fast, it would be very tempting for us to take the opt-in, because we would then not have the big hit of the stamp duty. But then the challenge then becomes the unknown sales outcome at the tail end. As you said, we're going to generate a two-tier market. well, our property is going to be less attractive to someone who wants to hold it long term because of the fact that they are going to be stuck with that tax. And so as property developers, we need to start looking really hard at, well, maybe we still bear the cost of that stamp duty so that our incoming purchaser has options as to what they can and can't do with that property.
That's correct. And again, looking at, your purpose of building that property, who's it going to appease, which marketplace is going to appeal to, and have you set it up right to appeal to the right market based on this possible scenario that, you've got this ongoing land tax for the life of the property. So that's going to be the real tricky part. And of course, I don't have all the answers right now. We're still seeking a lot of the answers, Rob, to be honest with you, from the government. But we've already identified where the challenges are. Here they are. Yeah. So this is the proposed tax rates that are on the table with this new opt-in method. So when they say broad-based tax, we know that owner-occupiers are currently exempt, but that's no longer going to be the case with this new system. So broad-based meaning everyone pays. It's an everyone pays system. So this particular reform, even though we've lobbied, to even at the thought of raising the GST rather than adding more property taxes, because I don't know, like in Queensland, for example, but we are the highest taxed asset class, period.
Oh, I've done many presentations, John, with regards to the number of taxes within the process. And there is close to 20 odd individual taxes that we get stung with throughout the process that many of us are oblivious to. And I'll go on to that at other times, but property developing and property investing, we substantially contribute to the health and wealth of society.
Pretty much, it's literally the number one revenue raiser in New South Wales. It has been for years, and yet again, they're going for the low-lying fruit, as I call it, and that's the property owner, because it's easy on the data, Rob, and you understand data very well, as I know. It's very easy to grab taxes where you've got the data to do it, and you can measure it. And property is right up there. So they've gone for the property owners to basically raise the revenue.
Yeah.
So here's some of the confusion that's going to go on, or as we found already. There's going to be different rates applied to different uses of property. So commercial, residential, primary production, mixed use is all going to be treated differently with a different rate. So it's not sort of like one, flat fee or anything like that. That could be nice and simple. It's going to involve different rates for different types of properties. And of course, the kicker is going to be, and the confusion is when you have that sort of mixed use component of a property, like a retail shop underneath and residents above, or the house on the farmland, income producing farmland. Or what they call, I'm not sure if you've gone into stratum properties. Yeah.
And so at any one individual property could get different tax rates applied depending upon the purpose of the incoming purchaser.
That's correct.
Which has absolutely zero bearing on the actual value add to the property itself, or I won't get too political there, but You know,
Yeah.
when you try to put a broad-based tax in, then it should be evenly, fairly broad, rather than I guess disadvantage any one individual sector.
Correct. Disadvantage this sector, and these guys have got the advantage, and yeah, and on it goes, like a complete sort of imbalance based on what type of property and the value of the property that you own.
Yeah.
So, you know, if this I guess becomes the law, I think you better align yourself with a really sharp accountant to work all this out. Because it's not going to be simple or easy.
No. So okay, so simple analogy.
Okay, just looking at the numbers as we discussed before. What does it look like when, as a sample, to go out and actually purchase a property in the current system versus this proposed system? Are you worse off or better off? So we've just done some simple maths here, based on a property purchase of 800,000, market value, and land value of 650. So the current system, with paying the stamp duty, the total acquisition cost, a probable market rent, outgoings, and no land tax as an owner occupier. No property tax payable as an owner occupier. In the end, you're coming out with about a 3.16% yield, 3.16, which is about the average yield at the moment for a Sydney metropolitan residential property even. But looking at the right-hand side under the proposed system, where you're paying a land tax, so you haven't paid stamp duty, and you've opted in to pay the land tax, which is $8,000 based on the land value. You're coming out of it with even a lesser yield of 2.28%.
And to be clear, that the return on investment of that stamp duty is 4 years based on the current rate, and because it's based on the land unimproved land value, as your property goes up in value, which we're all speculating on, that's why we're buying investment properties, then that tax is going to go up. So and that's going to be stuck with that property forever, irrespective. And so I'm going to say these particular properties that actually have opted in are going to start to become less and less palatable to any investor, right? To the point where I think that the two-tier market you were talking about means that people will pay a premium for a property that still has the stamp duty opportunity still attached to it.
That's correct. So that's what we're thinking as well, Rob, that if the yields, which are struggling at the moment, given the rents are falling, in certain parts of New South Wales and the inner city, buying the inner city, let's say, apartment is just going to be unattractive. The yields are shocker, and even if you were to go into and develop, a small, block of 4 or block of 6, and trying to pull sort of, yields of 7 or 8%, it's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen under the system. It's totally detracting it. And for that reason, we've voiced that your average property investor is going to be out. It's going to be out of this game.
Which then creates housing problems and housing shortages, and the knock-on effect on that is insane. Like it's going to create a snowball effect, I think, where less investors in the market, less people that can actually go in. Rents for the few that are left will go up, skyrocketing. People still can't afford to buy to get in because it's taken them so long to buy stamp duty. The opportunity for creating a whole bunch of homeless people out of this is just crazy.
Yeah, and that's under pressure already. The government's just not building housing fast enough, and the we know for a fact, we meet with Ahuri, the organisation for the homeless, and discuss all these things around supply, supply and demand, and they're just struggling. They're struggling, the ones that are sleeping out in the rough to put them into homes. We keep saying, give us a better incentive to build and to accommodate. Even in the affordable housing space, we've got a healthy membership of boarding house owners and new generation boarding house owners who want to develop. And the numbers just don't stack up at the moment because the incentives aren't there and the yields aren't there. So, this is just another reason, for the small to medium guy to just say, you know what, I'm out. I'm out.
Yeah.
So this needs to be looked at very, very closely. Talking about the first home buyers, I've already mentioned that this proposal reform does give the $25,000 cash if they opt in to purchase. And although it's going to help, it's going to help some first home buyers. The inner city purchasing is still going to be a bit of a struggle. We think, yep, it'll help, the regionals, which are already experiencing an upsurge in activity, both on the rents and property purchasing as well. So any incentive usually, triggers interest, but with that comes, of course, more demand. If you're going to have less supply, then there's going to be added pressure on property prices. And we're already seeing that in Sydney. The clearance rates already are up around 85%.
Yeah, and that 25,000, based on that 8,000 a year that you were talking about, you were only really talking about 3 years, and you've basically paid that cash back. All they've really done is forward loan you the cash in order to lock in revenue forever and a day.
That's correct. So, we said, look, a better option would be to actually relieve the stamp duty burden altogether and help the first home buyers by relieving and cutting the stamp duty for the first home buyer. Not create this kind of opt-in and cash incentive, and that's just going to spur on more buyers and will add more pressure in the high demand areas. I think it's just going to have a reverse effect of what they're trying to achieve here.
Yeah.
So without going on for too long, what is this all about? Well, this cartoon, I think you can see it pretty well. That was in the Sydney Morning Herald, shows our Dominic Perrotteau, who's behind all this, the finance, the treasurer for New South Wales. They're envisaging an $11 billion surge in collecting taxes from 7.4 billion last financial year. So overall, in the long term, Perrotteau's this basically backing the scraping of the stamp duty and opting into the property land tax will be a great money windfall in the first 4 years and beyond, as property values keep rising in the high demand areas.
Well, Plain Freddie can see if the government budgets and publicly forecasting that they're going to make more money, then clearly that's going to come out of your pocket. Now, it might look attractive at face value, but you'll be paying in the long run. And
yeah, the property owner will be paying, and will be paying big time. Yeah, look, he's he hasn't been backwards and coming forward that we we've got a state that's that has been on steroids in building and construction and infrastructure, and it's in the billions of dollars, and they're going to have to pay for it. And COVID's just exacerbated, the purse strings, and they're going to need to collect. They know that transactions have slowed down. Stamp duty is an impediment with building more homes, the construction industry, all that ecosystem, the property ecosystem. To give it a kicker, they need more transactions, and they need to kick it in the shins. And this is the proposal to do it, to rev up and kickstart that $1.3 trillion property sector, and keep it going. This is their solution. Now, I don't know if you know or not. This whole regime wasn't created within the New South Wales government. They actually outsourced the whole the white paper, and paid $6.2 million to I think it was KPMG to do research on this and to come up with the consultation paper, which is available to download. So even the government can't get their heads around this. They had to outsource it to a private company and pay them $6.2 million for 6 months of consultancy. I mean, Rob, honestly, I would have done it for $6.2 million.
Yeah.
That's just me.
I might have done it for $3 million, mate. But yeah.
I'm sure you would have. So
I can see a few questions.
They know it's complex. They know it's taxes aren't politically right, and there's no way in the world something as this complex would involve our government coming up with some great solutions.
Yeah. Now, I'm conscious of the fact that we've got a few questions coming through, mate. So we want to start to talk about the events that you guys have got coming up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So just to wrap it all up, there's the summary of what our thoughts are around this proposal. I do urge you, the deadline is the 15th of March, so you literally got 2 weeks to make a submission. And download the actual consultation paper and make an online submission on the New South Wales Treasury website. It's all there. You'll love the document. That's about 11, 12 pages long, with all these happy people laughing and clapping and running through the forest and dancing with each other with this proposal. It's just amazing. I urge you to even do a 1-page and just submit it. Just submit it and ask those hard questions.
Yeah, so I'll stick that link in the live as well as we go, mate. So so as you said, you've got an event coming up this Wednesday. So that's the 3rd of March for an hour, 6:30 till 7:30 p.m. Where you're going to tell people a little bit more about, I guess, a little bit more depth about what we've gone into today, and also what they can do about it. And as you said, they've got 2 weeks to do something about it. So,
yeah. So we've got the land tax webinar this Wednesday night. It's going to cover 2 things, and it's got 2 experts that are coming in to chat with us. Our own committee member, James Rubin, who's a registered valuer, does a lot of work on land tax valuations, large and small. And we've got our affiliate sponsors, Madison Marcus, who are lawyers very, very closely aligned to the property sector. We've got one of their best coming in and discussing how to actually address and tackle land tax objections in a court. So land and environment court. He's going to be giving some case studies around that. and we're going to be talking around the processes of objecting to or having an appeal when you're not happy with your land tax bill, which I'm sure some of you aren't already received those this year.
Yes. So I've just stuck the links for those events into the chat window so that people can, I guess, follow those and register for your event, mate. And also the link to the Treasury website as well. Now, I guess you've got, for this webinar, you've got a price for members and a price for non-members. So members are for free, non-members are $55. Probably worthwhile, just in the interest of time, if we can just do a 2-second sales pitch on what's it cost to be a member, and I guess the value of joining, even if it's just for this one event.
Sure. So joining the POA, we have a 2-tier membership, which is $199 per year, or $280 you can pay up front for 2 years. Look, we kind of have a reputation as the NRMA for property owners. It's a safe place where you can reach out and talk to people in different expertise in their fields in your property journey. You can be kept up to date with educational workshops, seminars, and our e-news. And we give you that regular updates on anything that's going to be drastically affecting you as a property owner or a property investor. There's also affiliate programs, Rob, like yours. We can refer you to some great people in your property journey. And of course, look, we're a phone call away just to help you. And of course, we are the voice. We are the voice for New South Wales property owners, representing you at the state level and occasionally at the federal level when it comes to reform. So, you know, it's just power in numbers, and we've got a seat at the table. So we are representing you as a member in your best interest there as a member. Great value for $199 per annum to get all that. Even out of this seminar on Wednesday, even if you have to pay your $55, what you'll learn there and apply with regards to you know, challenges around your land tax, it'll pay for itself, you know, tenfold.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to take some questions from our audience. Before I do, I'm just going to do a little bit of telling people a little bit of ourselves and our network. So guys, these Sunday sessions we do most Sundays at 5 p.m. Brisbane time. And for any of you who haven't seen our back catalogue of sessions, well, we subscribe those to YouTube, so you can actually go and look at the back catalogue. Some very varied and wide presentations there across the community. So on top of that, we run a couple of Facebook groups. So our Property Developer Network page, I guess just search for Property Developer Network. That's a great place to go and find out about our community, how to start your journey in property development. And we also have a sister group called Development Site Deal Hub, where you can flick off-market transactions and I guess either acquire one or flick one, or even find investment partners for a project that you might be running. And lastly, we also have an event coming up in the next couple of weeks on the 13th of March, a half-day event called Developer Launchpad, where we're going to be talking to everyone about I guess how you can start your particular property development journey and what's involved and the like. So if you are new to property development and interested in learning a little bit more, then go to propdev.info/launchpad. And again, I'll stick that link in the chat window in a couple of secs. So that said, let's go to the audience and see what we've got. This takes a couple of seconds to try and get the questions coming through, but a lot of people saying hello to both myself and John. So rather than naming everybody, I'll just say a general hello back. Wendy says, I think if people know the ins and outs of the new proposal, both owner-occupiers and investors ultimately lose out in a few years post-sale, as the amount paid per year overtakes the initial stamp duty amount. Seems ridiculous for the public and only benefits the government, in my opinion. So rather than a question, a statement, but I think both John and I.
Point taken, Wendy. We feel the same way, and I think, as I mentioned, really this new regime is going to hurt those who stay with their properties the longest, and economically they won't benefit, rather than just paying the stamp duty up front and be done with it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So Felicity's got a question. Do you think some of the thinking behind this is the hope that it will push investors out of the market and so make more properties available for owner occupiers, even if that's not necessarily correct?
Okay, that's a great question. My personal thoughts is the government's been tackling with the investors for quite some time now, and that really started. I think you guys in Queensland, and I know Victoria, have had a lot of changes on the residential tenancies front, where they've tightened the laws pretty tightly, more in favour of the tenants than the landlord. Same thing's already happened here in New South Wales. A lot of the changes which have occurred, including this one, it almost makes you think that the answer to that is yes. The investors have had it pretty good for too long, and they have sidelined the first home buyers who have complained, and the media's turned kind of, you can sense that the media is now supporting more and more the first home buyer, just to get them in front, politically. And I kind of agree with you that the answer could be yes, even though it could be a conspiracy. But it seems almost that everything that the moves that they're making at the moment is kind of appeasing that political angle, which is let's get the first home buyers vote for us.
Yep. Felicity has another question. There's also quite an emphasis on how this is going to help the first home buyers, but it seems to me that having an ongoing financial burden of, say, $8,000 a year, as in used in this example, isn't really making sense.
No. The answer is no. No, it doesn't make any sense to us, and that's why the POA is opposing this. And we want more detail. We don't like the proposal at all, and we have put forward our suggestions how this can be more balanced, a balanced approach. We agree that stamp duty is going to go, but we can't go from one bad tax to another bad tax. That's the problem that we have.
Yep, agreed. Okay, so a few other comments about how they've loved the presentation. So I'll just acknowledge that and say thank you, folks. Question from Michael. Why do they call it a land tax? It should be called a property tax to avoid doubling up and avoid confusion in the nomenclature, if I can say that word correctly. Most investors pay land tax anyway above the threshold, so it's not hard to do if one investor or one entity owns two or more properties in one state. Then if they elect to avoid the stamp duty upon next purchase, they'll pay the traditional land tax and this new impost. And a big sad face from Michael. So yeah, I guess the question there, I think, is why they're calling it a land tax, and that's probably me referring in the marketing of the land tax, but I think they generally are actually calling it a property tax.
Yeah, look, correct, and this is not a land tax reform. This is a property tax system reform, and yes, look, the underlying tax is based on the unimproved capital value, which is the land, after all. So I don't think moving forward they will call it a land tax, but it'll be a broad-based property tax, and everybody expected to pay. So Michael, the answer is I concur with you, but you know, the percentage of value is based on the land value. So that's ultimately a land tax, I'm afraid. Yeah.
Yeah, very good.
Council rates are also a land tax, but they don't call it a land tax. It's a council rate.
Yeah. So Bernard's got a question. We, the end user, will pay more money in property taxes if we hold for longer time frames. So the answer to that, Bernard, is if you opt in, right? So I guess the first part is, do you support it by not doing any correspondence to them and lodging your issues and concerns now? That's the first part. And then secondly, if it gets in, are you going to opt into that property? So if you choose to pay stamp duty still, then you will just have that one-off cost. But yeah, in the end, yes, the end user will be paying forever.
That's right. And the other thing we brought up is around the grandfather. If this goes through, the grandfathering of this law as well. So those who already paid stamp duty and have already made a purchase and want to opt in into a property tax, we've got a double whack here. So we are proposing that there is an exemption from those who have already transacted for a period of time. Look, the other solution we're pitching is if there's a problem with stamp duty, which we know there is, it's a cost. How come that's not spread over 5 years and paid in installments instead of one lump sum? I mean, isn't that a solution?
Yeah, absolutely.
Instead of introducing a new tax, or why don't they just split that up over 5 years and have that trickle in rather than the burden of paying one lump sum, you know, in the 40s, 50s, 60,000s of dollars to buy an average first home?
Yeah, I agree. Lillian's got a question. So there's a few other comments that in thanking us for the updates. Question from Lillian: how do you think the new tax proposal will affect the property market itself? Yeah,
so there's the $60 million question or something, I think they call it. How will it affect the property market? Well, what they want for it to happen is they want to raise the transaction levels immediately. So it may spur on the transactions, which means that potentially, and I think I've covered this off already, but potentially if there's more demand and if it's coming out from the first home buyer sector, well, they're just competing with each other, but not only with each other, they're competing with the investors as well, trying to do their deals. So potentially we could have pressure on property prices, and that could be pretty widespread from the inner cities to the regionals.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think it's going to spur on the short-term market, and I want to say short-term because there's no direct cost up front, so there's less time to save, and you get the cash back in your pocket. So you, on paper, look like you're going to be in front for the first couple of years, but you know, after years 4, 5, and 6, you've well and truly paid that back. And so I think the market will take off for 12 months to 24 months, and then it'll start to balance itself out. But that's when I think the two-tier market starts to kick in, is, you know, when people start to need to resell those properties. That's
right. And just one thing to share with your audience, a little birdie tells us that there is a proposal on the table for more access into superannuation, and this time up to $40,000 can be drawn as well for the right purpose of purchasing a home. Now, given our experiences during COVID with the $10,000 pre 1st of July and another 10 after the 1st of July, I can see a cash grab there going on for that particular reason. So again, that's just going to add to more activity and spur the buyers on going into the market. If they can access cash that easily for that purpose, it'll be game on.
Yep, agreed. So question from Kelly. In an ideal world, this is aimed at you, John. In an ideal world, John, what would your strategy be instead of the proposed land tax reforms? What would your alternative be?
So we've surveyed our members. I'll just tell you what our members thought about this. We've surveyed our members. We asked them those tough questions. You know, one of the thorns in our members' side, and has been for years, is paying land tax. You know, bracket creep. You know, has now caused them a bit of pain where financially the holdings that they've got now, you know, it's eating up. Some of the land tax bills are eating up about 35% of their revenue of their property. That's a fair whack. So from our members' point of view, and from our point of view, that a lot of the feedback was we want a status quo on the land tax. We're just happy with the system as it is. We're happy to pay. We don't want it raised. We don't want it changed. We don't want this opt-in situation. And some of them even said, look, we're happy to raise the GST a bit. We'll go to 15%. If you can do away with the stamp duty. We want a broad-based tax where it's truly broad-based and it's not just taxing the property owner. If we're going to do a broad-based community revenue raiser, everybody pays in some way. That's the fair and equitable system. That's the ideal world that we're looking at. So from our point of view, the feedback was leave things the way they are, do away with the stamp duty, introduce another tax, and that may mean 15% GST, or the other proposal which I mentioned is pay off the stamp duty by instalments over 5 years, drip feed it, or reduce the overall stamp duty formula to lessen the burden, rather than go into this kind of unknown of creating this two-tier marketplace and confusion across different property types and property uses. And they want their home exempt from land tax.
Yep. Well, mate, we've run out of questions and we've gone past the hour. So overall, good chat. Have very much appreciated it, as have our audience. So a reminder for everyone, that event is on Wednesday this week at 6:30 p.m. New South Wales time. The link is already in the chat window, but I will stick it in again. And highly recommend, I guess, taking a look at the POA if you are a property owner and an investor, or even property developer. I guess they're doing really good work. So I want to thank you, John, for your time.
It's been my pleasure. Yeah.
And looking forward to I guess a long relationship between the two of us, mate. And for everyone else, we will see you next week for our next Sunday session. So bye for now. Hang on, we're still live.